Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of That Podcast. My name is Ryan Janke, and as always, I'm joined by Pastor DJ Lura and Sarah DeYoung. And you know what? Before we get started, we have a guest. Yeah. There are people who you just love to, sometimes people ask, hey, if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with anybody, living or not, who would it be?
Gosh, who would it be? Living or not?
Yeah, anybody.
I'd like to sit down and have coffee with my grandpa George, who died when I was 1.5. Mm-hmm. I have one very faint memory that may be fabricated based on stories I was told of him. Mm-hmm. Because what do you remember at 1.5?
Well, right, yeah.
I would love to talk to him and find out more about just his life and how he grew up and all that stuff. That's some people would say like Abraham Lincoln or Jesus, or Martin Luther. That's a good pastoral answer. But my grandpa.
Yeah, Sarah.
Dolly Parton.
I'm
wearing my Holly Dolly Christmas sweater. It's before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I saw the most interesting article that she helped to fund the vaccine for COVID-19.
You want to hear a funny story about this?
Yeah.
So Dolly Parton just released a new Christmas album. I feel like this is just the time where people find out that I really love Dolly Parton. When she talked about releasing a Christmas album, I said, this is it. This is what's going to cure COVID. Dolly Parton is going to cure COVID.
Not in the way you intended, but
one way or another.
What if that is the actual vaccine? You go in to get your shot, and they just start playing Dolly Parton's new album,
or give you the CD.
Give you the CD, yeah. Play this.
Sounds like a win-win.
Well, what I'm getting at is
Ryan's answer is sitting right here. We should get you a cup of coffee.
It should. Well,
wait, let me try one more. Oh wait, no, that's not the one I wanted. So let's see.
We really have to get that thing labeled.
Yeah,
for
we
you.
do.
Get you a cheat sheet.
No, that's not it either.
That's a.
No, I did it again. I'm gonna set it aside. Okay, hold on. I know which one I want to do.
Back.
Okay. Now, go ahead.
Now back away from the table. Well, what I'm getting at is it is great to have somebody to just sit down and talk with, and you can talk for hours. And our guest today is somebody that you can sit down with and talk for hours. I love it when I get to have a conversation with John Melland. John, how you doing?
Well, at first here a little while, I felt like George Gobel and Johnny Carson because there's a lot going on I didn't understand.
You ever feel like the whole world's a tuxedo and you're a pair of brown shoes?
Yeah, that's his line. Yeah. Anywho, you both haven't been married as long as I have, so the correct answer to your first question is my wife.
Oh,
well, my wife doesn't like coffee though.
Well, I'm sorry.
My wife doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can get away with it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Our wives, they get enough conversation without listening to the podcast. John, how you doing?
I'm doing very, very well.
Good.
Yeah. I'm very glad to be here. We kind of initialized a ministry here about 3 months ago, and where we knew that there are a number of people that couldn't access service by the means that we have available in our technology. So I proposed to the church that maybe we consider taping the services.
Yeah.
And both services every Sunday. And that ministry has grown from 3 people that are enjoying those to now we have 11, maybe 12 that are taking advantage of that, and it's growing and it's really uplifting. So that's just part of why I do things and who I am, is that I'm about service and about offering that, and I think that'll come full circle in our conversation here today.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's people love it. You know, there's a lot of people that that you take CDs to that they probably haven't left.
Yeah.
They're wherever they're living at.
Their
Since,
rooms or
since COVID started. Yeah, it's a really appreciated service that you're doing.
A lot of isolated people out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So the reason that other than I like to just sit and chat with you, John, the other reason I brought you in was a couple of weeks ago we were talking, and you told me a story of how you sort of were a church planter back a while. Well, I don't know how many years ago it would be, but I'll let you tell the story. I thought it was neat.
Well, to get kind of frame that out, everybody has kind of a vocation in life, and mine was teaching for a long time. I have to put it plainly that some people do a job and some people love what they do. And I fell in love with what I did for education. I in the 30 years that I was teaching, there were just probably less than a handful that were work. And you get those years with whatever you do, circumstances make that. But the rest of the time it was just like perfect fit. And I remember as a young child growing up in western North Dakota, where you have things called buttes and ranches that are more than just 40 acres or whatever. I used to work with my grandmother on the farm, and one of the things you always had to do is on rainy days or whatever, you did fencing. And I was probably 10 or 11, and I was working with my grandmother fencing, and she stopped after a while, and she said, "Johnny," she says, "I think I got it figured out." And I said, "What's that?" "I think you're going to be one of three things when you grow up." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" "I think you're either going to be a teacher or a preacher, or you're going to be a radio announcer." And today I've done all three.
Yeah. Finally.
Check it off the list.
So, yeah, but teaching came easy for me, but along that line too, I was also doing ministry within the church, teaching Sunday school like my father modeled for me to do, and later I had confirmation groups, and that has been a mold that reinforced what I was raised into and how I felt about what my idea of what I had to do. There was an argument I had with God when I was 19. In western North Dakota, where I grew up in McKenzie County, we didn't need Disneyland. We just had to go one of the 4 buttes that surrounded town, and parents just knew.
You gotta explain that to you, because not everyone here is from North Dakota. What is butte?
A butte?
Yes. What is a butte?
Well, there's 2 answers. One is a town and just south of Velva. No, I guess if you maybe had been in the Southwest, you'd know what a mesa is, but there are some places out in western North Dakota in my county that I grew up in, McKenzie County. They're uplifting of sandstone rock, and they can be 300 or more feet and level on top or not. We had one north of town that I used to go to quite a bit, and that's where the focus of the argument was, but that was Ragged Butte, and it's about a mile long. Great place to find fossils and explore and do things that kids like to do. I mean, we found out that if you put a can of beans on a fireplace or a fire pit or a fire, you better have an opening on the top, or you got a lot of exploding elements to that learning experience.
Oh, there's going to be some experiments after this podcast goes live.
We didn't put any "do not try this at homes" yet on any of the episodes. This one might need one.
Yeah, they thought
Warning.
they thought Mentos and Diet Coke was the way to go.
And that does work pretty well. As long as you get something that'll go up. But no, in that time when I was young, the Butte was always a place of solace, and being as high as it is, my cousins, if you could even go and online and check this place out at Table Butte by Keene, North Dakota. There's just, when you get up on top of those, you can see the land around you in so many different directions. And this one particular northern spot, this northern rock, a lot of people who've been up on Ragged Butte will know exactly where I'm talking about. It's the farthest most northern large rock on that butte complex. And you can see the Missouri River, which is miles away from there. You can see it off.
Oh, wow.
So it's just one of those things that, you know, you get up there and you with the wind in your face, because in western North Dakota, you have wind always moving.
Yeah.
And you just have the quiet of the prairies, and you have the panorama before you. And it's, you know, it was a place where I'd go where I felt in the presence of God, always. Mm-hmm. And it was whenever I had problems or I had questions that I couldn't solve myself or didn't want to ask anybody else other than God, that's where I'd go. Mm-hmm. And I was 19 and had gone 1 year at college and busted my foot up in football, and I was kind of planning on having a career at football. It was probably the luckiest break I ever had in sports because it kind of turned me in another direction. But I sat on that rock for a long time and I prayed, and you know, I asked for an answer, and it was, you know, it was just like a bolt out of blue came the call. God wanted me to serve, to be a pastor, and there the argument started. Wasn't very early before this event that I'd lost some uncles that were very close to me, and being that close to death, I just said no. I said, there's no way, because I know at some point and some time I'm going to have to comfort somebody or some family who lost somebody very close. And I've seen that pain, I felt it, and I wasn't ready for that. Mm-hmm. And I also knew that maybe I'd have to say goodbye to a very dear friend, and I wasn't ready for that. And so I said no. And I said no really loud. I mean, I said, no way, you know, and I said it out loud. And I just walked away from that spot, and I didn't go back for a very, very long time because I knew that argument would come up again. Well, I went on, and I ended up going back to college after working some time in the East Coast at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. I mean, that's where I met Jan. I was out there. Her dad was a minister in the church in which I was going, and my brother was out there too. And we all felt the need eventually to get back home. And when Jan and I came back, we went to Minot State and finished our degree, and that's where we ended up teaching in the Minot area. But all during that time, I kept getting a tug, you know, to do something more than just teach. And so that's where the Sunday school came, and that's where the confirmation classes. And I remember more than once, one of the pastors said, you know, sooner or later, John, we're going to get you. And I just said, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And anyway, and it was somewhere real close to Easter, maybe in Lent. Oh, golly. I had maybe 7 years of teaching left. And Pastor Lee Yarger, approached me at the front of the church as I was walking in, minding my own business.
Those meddlesome pastors.
Yeah.
And he says, John, I need some help. So what do you say to a pastor when they ask, you say, yeah, sure, what do you need? He said, well, I got this little church up in Glenburn, North Dakota called Hope Lutheran. I need some help up there. And I said, sure, what do you need? Want me to take offering and do the candles? You know, what do you got? No, John. He looked at me, says, I'd like for you to do the service. And it's crazy because about 2 weeks before that, I was sitting in our comfortable pew in the back of the church where all kids or young family members that have kids sit, you know, and after a while that becomes their place, thinking, you know, that'd be pretty powerful to witness in front of a group of people like this, sometime to witness your faith. And I just kind of blew it off. Well, God listens to those things. And he just, I could just see him smiling. Yeah, okay. And sure enough, I said yes. And I went up to that little church, and there was probably, I don't know, less than 30 people, and they're older people. And the first Sunday I did a service there, and to put this in perspective, before I'd go up there, I joined the pastoral study group just to get ready and kind of get some guidance, some good help. And they gave me a number of things to read, which some of them I was familiar with. But those discussions allowed me to free think, and they would explain some of the things they're doing. And it was really, really powerfully strong. But that first time I was in front of everybody, I was like a fall leaf. I was up there just waving in the wind, and I was about ready to fall off. Anyway, they were a very kind group, and they call it not a potluck, but a carry-in dinner, and so they fed you, and I thought that was good, and I sat down and they said, "Well, could you come again?" and I kind of looked at him, and I go to myself, I wasn't that good. and this good friend of mine, Bud Schultz, he read between the lines right away, and he said, "Don't get a big head here. We just need a live body." I fell in love with it right at that. But I said, "There's only one condition for me coming back." And what's that? I said, "You got a computerized organ up there." They called it Digital Dorothy, because the former organist was Dorothy. And this thing just did the hymns, but it didn't pause at the end like Gerald does every Sunday. But it gives you enough time to collect to go up. This doesn't do that. So about the third measure, you're catching up. It was terrible. and so I said, "Can I bring my wife? She plays the organ." And they said, "Yeah." So for 7 years, Jan and I were up there, and it was probably the most uplifting time of my life in ministry and in anything. I mean, I thought teaching was the best fit, but it was amazing. But here's that thing. I wasn't there even a month, and I had my first funeral.
Yeah.
I had my first funeral. I had 27 in the time that I was there. Now, you remember I started out with 27. Well, that wasn't that group, but there were extended people who couldn't. They were, in different places that called that their home.
Right.
But I did 27. The very thing that I said I couldn't do, God placed in front of me. Mm-hmm. And I learned they still aren't easy for me, but I learned that it's a very powerful part of the ministry. And the only reason I really left doing that was kind of led me into the next phase of ministry, which was church planting. 2009 came, and the whole change within the church, the LCA, I just couldn't be part of that. And because that little church was affiliated under the umbrella of an ELC, Church First Lutheran in Minot, they had to decide what they were going to do, and I didn't want to be the voice that decided it for them. They had to decide. Mm-hmm. And so I left the LCA, I left Hope, and they continued on under the umbrellaship ELCA, but kind of shared with LCMC. They're a renegade congregation, and I still love them for that. They're German up there, and it's kind of like they're Norwegian. You can tell me, but forget it. If you can ask it, I'll give it to you. Tell me, forget it. That's they're very strong. But so Jan and I then joined a Hazen congregation, which was about an hour and 15 minutes away. That was LCMC, and we drove every Sunday for about almost 12 months. It was about a year. Joined the congregation, joined choir and all that, and made some very, very good friends in Hazen. And to this day, they're very dear to me. It was a healing time, because when you say goodbye to a church, and it wasn't Hope, but it was First Lutheran. I mean, a church that my kids had grown up. We baptized them there. well, not all of them, because the first two were in East Hampton, but they were raised in that church, confirmation, confirmed, been in Sunday school. I mean, it was part of their DNA going up. And to have to say goodbye to that because you felt their church was leaving you, it was hard. And so we needed time to heal. And Pastor Wolf in Hazen and Peace Lutheran was very good. And we healed. And then one Sunday, he said, if you have gifts, he was preaching the gospel, and one of the points was, everyone has different gifts. I think it's in Matthew where we're talking. And, some people are teachers and some are, but you're to use those gifts and not bury them. And I was feeling good Norwegian guilt going there. So on the way, I was sitting in the pew and I had communion, and the words, Jan's looking at me going, oh.
Oh, no.
And I said to her, maybe I should get back in the saddle, and be part of Pulpit Supply or something like that. On the way back from Hazen, I got a telephone call. One of the former members of Hope had died in an accident boating on Sakakawea, and they wanted me to do the funeral. There it is again. I say yes. God says, okay, here we go. And it's been like that. Well, I wasn't so much after that. I had some friends of mine answered an ad in the paper. If you feel like the church has left you, or a group of us are meeting in the Ward County Library. There 33 people showed up from a number of different Lutheran churches who felt like we did. Mm-hmm. We looked around the room. We said, we've had churches with less people. Let's just do a service. So 2 weeks later, we had a church service. 66 people showed up.
Wow.
Within 3 weeks after that, we'd outgrown the site. We needed to find a bigger place. Ward County had restrictions about how many people could be in a building. And we had some really eager people that were really forward-thinking. And they made a deal with First Presbyterian in Minot. At the time it was called First Presbyterian. We started church at noon. You wouldn't believe how many college students we had in that congregation at that. But we grew. I mean, it was like in a very short time order, we were, very close to 200 people, if not there. And it was, wow. And we were ready to make a call. There was Rod Wilson, a good friend of mine from Minot, and I were doing the ministry at that time, leading, and we called the pastor, and then we moved from that site to a church farther north, and we did split service. But I was part of that whole thing. It was really a heady time. And when we started at that other church, the reason we moved is we felt that the time there's a sweet time in parish time, and that's at 8 to 11 time. And noon was, although it was good for the fit and good for a lot of college kids, it was late. And so we were losing some people as it got into football season. Too many Viking fans. How much problems can you deal with on a Sunday? That was another one. But anyway, I'm not a Viking fan. But anyway, that there is.
Well, that was good to have you on the show.
But this is why I like John so much.
But anyway, we ended up working out a deal with that congregation. They were NALC, and we had decided at that point in time to be LCMC, and had a board and all that, and had called the pastor, and it was a perfect fit.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt again. It's just whenever we get into the inside Lutheran stuff, I try to explain a little bit of this, and so. For those of you who don't know, the NALC is the North American Lutheran Church, and LCMC is Lutheran Congregations in Mission for Christ. They are the way they speak of each other, and they both are church denominations, associations of former, originally ELCA congregations, or Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Full disclosure, I was an ELCA pastor, and Atonement comes out of that tradition as well. The NALC and the LCMC speak of themselves as fraternal twins moving in the same direction. We just do church differently.
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, and just a quick point in that, Pastor, I had a Norwegian moment. I'll think of it in a second. But one of my pastors that I had at First Lutheran, very, very good mentor, who's now in a congregation not in Minot anymore. He left the ELCA and became. There's a connection between he and Pastor Paul Cross to that church, and I'm kind of hesitating about saying his name just because of the format we're in. Yep. But anyway, he went to an NALC church, but he kept First Lutheran together through some very trying times, and I think the Wisconsin church that he's in, Pastor Cross would know the name. There's a strong bond between the two because of him starting his pastoral venture on the advice of Pastor Cross. So, wow. So there's a tie all the way around here that goes back to, but
Pastor Cross knows everybody.
He knows a lot of people.
It's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing.
The 6
degrees of Pastor Paul Cross.
Okay. Anyway, so getting back to what I was at is that once we had moved into that environment in the NALC church building, they would have church and we'd have Sunday school, and then when they would have church, we would. Or when they have Sunday school, we'd have church. And so it works. We hit the sweet hour time. We were doing flipped things. And so we were able to worship as families. It was wonderful. Then I started to feel uncomfortable when Jan started to feel uncomfortable. That's kind of the way it works. And, men and women hear different things. Mm-hmm. And come to find out that the pastor that they had called had more of a vision of women being not as active in church. I'm trying to be very diplomatic in this. Mm-hmm. It just didn't rub well with me. I mean, how do you do a potluck? How do you do a funeral? How do you run Sunday school without that important element? I mean, to me, I could not envision not having Pastor Becky as my pastor here, and to deny that option, so I just quietly drifted away, and went back to Hazen for a while, and then within a short while, I got a call from Rod Wilson, and he and his wife and Jan and I sat underneath our ash tree, and we started another congregation out of the people who drifted from that. And Faith Lutheran in Minot is from that. And, that's the hard thing about church planning. When you start something like the energy is always there, that second group were kind of licking their wounds a little bit, mm-hmm. because they'd gone through first the ELCA and then now this. And it's been a struggle for them. And I felt that towards the end of that ministry that I was doing for them, I think we did that for about 5 years, that they were really leaning heavy on me. Mm-hmm. And Rod was getting the other part of that, and they needed to call a pastor to move them forward. And there were, maybe anywhere from 40 to 60 people there, and it's hard. Finding a place was tough. We were even at the fairgrounds until the fairgrounds couldn't have the museum there, and then now they're at a Bible college up in Minot, and they have church up there. But it's difficult. But I felt that they wouldn't grow unless I left and let them move forward. And that was a hard thing. Every time you make a transition, you can lose people, and they did. But right now, they're still going on. They're struggling like a lot of church plants do. The other congregation is still going in the direction they want to go. I think they have probably moved now towards the NAALC or NALC. There's one of them with 2 A's in it. I don't remember how that goes.
So there's the Association of American Lutheran Churches. That's AALC.
Yeah.
They are closer in line, probably theologically, and as you're talking church structure with allowing only men to be pastors, the AALC is like that. And I think they're in a full communion relationship with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which also only allows pastors to be men.
But there's some kind of a tie-in. They've also some kind of agreement with a Lutheran Brethren Church in Minot. But I don't know how tight that is. I know that there was something. But anyway.
There's many different Lutheran, I'm using finger quotes, synods, so to speak, in the United States. And we all love our alphabet soup. There's the AFLC, the AELC, there's Lutheran Brethren, there's all kinds. So, and there's only a few that allow women to be pastors.
But the thing that kind of also predicated us leaving that circumstance, we were planning a move to come to Fargo.
Mm-hmm.
And so once we sold the house in Minot, it was supposed to be a 110-day market. We sold the house in 10 days. I mean, we didn't get
out.
Yeah. Spend 40 years in community and you feel the boot, No, it was hard because we left our faith friends there, knowing that we had family here, because at that time we had 2 of our kids were here. And going to my oldest son was coming here, and we just knew that this was going to be home. I had connections with the pastors here, and I knew before I left the keys in the counter in Minot, I knew I was coming to this church. There's a interesting dynamic that's different today. I think former pastor here talked about it. Today, the pyramid is different than it was when I grew up. Used to be the first thing you did is you found the church, and then within that you found the education school that was nearby that which you wanted, and then your occupation, whatever you did, kind of supported all of that. Well, now it's kind of reversed. You're sitting on the point where your occupation is kind of driving you to wherever you're at, and then the school is wherever's close to where it's convenient for your work and that. Mm-hmm. And then the church is the last part of that connection, and some people don't get that point, And so it's an interesting dynamic. We still fell under that first dynamic. The church, we knew where we were going. We struggled to find a place. We couldn't get a home. We'd put 5 things on the internet, and then we're going to see 5 houses here. Before we could get halfway here, Cooperstown, they would be sold, So now what do? We had these 5 places. So we got lucky on one of those misadventures, and there was a house that was coming up for sale. It hadn't quite hit the market, and we drove up, put a bid on it. We were in Medora with a family gathering, and we signed the papers for the house in the computer. Well, I was so thankful for technology, because there's no way I know we could get that house. We had to come back. So that's how we ended up here. Then I sat in the pew, mm-hmm. And I joined the men's Thursday morning group, but I felt the tug. I wasn't done yet, and it wasn't much longer, and the church asked me to be part of the services here on Sunday, and I embraced it totally. It was like being home again,
mm-hmm.
And even though this is a different congregation, I felt like I knew enough of the people by that time, and I began to realize my outreach had changed. My focus was more on the elderly,
mm-hmm.
and here I am. Who are you gonna know that's probably gonna be thrown in your face from that argument you had when you were 19. Is that very group who I'm ministering to, and how, and this whole thing boils down to this: 2 words. God wins.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Yep.
No, yeah. I mean, and you look back and you see all of those different ways and places I went. It was just kind of preparing me for where I am now. I mean, the ability, I think teaching is a great avenue to develop how to read people and then to listen. I still struggle with listening as well as I should, but listen and reading people when you can see sometimes you see folks that are hurting and they're not telling you that. It's part of being married. You learn to read too. Yeah. But they're not in you, so you just know how to talk the language that isn't going to get them uncomfortable, but allow them to be comfortable with you enough to tell you what they just sometimes need to just let it go or to let it out. And I've learned over the years that sometimes you can't do anything but just listen. And I'm part of the Befrienders group here in this church, and that's one of the key elements of the Befrienders is, some of these people you deal with have some real problems in life, and you're not there to cure, you're there to comfort and to listen. You don't have the answers sometimes, and it's not always good to give suggestions. My dad was a mechanic. I like to fix things. Sometimes I wreck things when I fix things, but
just don't wreck them. Just don't fix them so that somebody else can't come in and fix it.
Well, that's why you buy new. but anyway, no
wrecking or improving.
Yeah. It's a fine line.
Yeah,
but the thing is that I learned through marriage that sometimes my wife just needs to say. And have me hear what she's saying, and just to when I hear what she's saying, not to try solve her problem, because that's not what she's looking for. She wants me to listen, and that's kind of what I hear when I take that skill, and when I as a befriender, sometimes you just echo back what they're saying, so they know you're hearing it, and they feel like, first of all, they're validated, and second, that you really care.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And not saying those words in that format that you don't. It's just that your heart is out there, and you're trying to find a way to let them know that you hurt with them, and you wish that you could take the hurt away. But we, in this world of reality, know that that's not always possible. But having support, hugs are part of who I am. And so this COVID thing's just killing me, and to know that somebody is hurting and not being able to just give them that quiet solace of comfort by a hug is hard. But you try to find the words, and sometimes there aren't words. Sometimes it's just silence. They just need that time. So, I think my befriender people would just be smiling when I'm saying that, because that's two things that I don't do well. But it's one of those tools of interpersonal skills that I've learned through befrienders that it's got me to the point where I feel more comfortable being with people, even though they're struggling. So I guess in a nutshell, a big nutshell, because I've been here for a while. But the thing is that don't ever, if I was to say something to a young person, don't underestimate God's patience for you. He has plans for your gifts, and all you have to do is that big word we've heard the last couple Sundays, trust in Him. Trust in Him that He will guide you through. I mean, that was the thing that I had to do. I had to trust God that I could get through that hurdle that I knew would stand before me. And they, my yoke is heavy. I felt that heavy yoke when I had to help a family through the grieving of a 16-year-old girl.
Mm.
That was powerful. And my heart was right there with them. So, but through all of that, God gave, that's the thing. Whenever I preach, I have two examples to share here. Whenever I preach, I always say a prayer before I say even one word. I go to the altar and I pray. My prayer is, God, may what I say today be a blessing in thy sight. Mm-hmm. And then I ask for the guidance of the Holy Spirit from that point on. So when I turn around and I go to that pulpit and I begin to preach, I believe that it isn't me, John Melland, this average guy. It's the Holy Spirit coming through me. And whatever they hear is what, the Holy Spirit has in there. And so in that sense, I remember sometimes I thought I gave a really great sermon and it was like, and then I sometimes thought I had just laid an egg, and I'll have invariably somebody come up and say, that's just what I needed to hear today. And go, what did you hear?
I feel the same way. There's many days that I'm like, obviously I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because the Holy Spirit takes
Yeah.
the witness of the preacher and takes that word, which is the word of Christ, and does with it what he chooses.
One last thing I'm going to say. I used to write my sermons out in longhand all the time. I tried to do it on a computer and type them out, but it just didn't have the feel for me. So I got this bump on my knuckle here that it's never going away on my thumb. It's a reminder of all the thousands of words. Anyway, but the whole point of that is that some of those sermons, I would read the text a week before and let it just germinate.
Mm-hmm.
And then about Wednesday of the next week, I'd start working on it. Then Saturday, I'd sit down and write. And it was crazy for many, many of those years of when I was preaching. I just felt the Spirit was driving that pen. I mean, I was just kind of watching the words come. And so you then, that's very powerful. And it's very significant that it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to share one last story, and then I'll call it a night. But there may be some other of you that say, "Boy, I wonder what it'd be like to be a pastor or to speak, and what would it take?" Well, the hump came for me not just stand in front of a group of people, but at that time the ELCA had a bishop in Western Synod. There were two Lutheran churches. Here's where the politics can get involved. Two Lutheran churches in that community. Hope came from a rural church, and that congregation wanted to keep their church. They were a very wealthy congregation, even though they were small. There was a younger church in the community, and larger, and had a new building, and had all the bells and whistles, but there was some animosity between them, primarily over finance. I think one group wanted to see if they could join together, just alleviate some of the things that they had for financial restrictions, and maybe drive their church in a bigger format. And there's a reasonable argument there. But, they were a German-Norwegian group, and, you can tell me, but you can't tell me much, So they were very set in their ways. So the dynamic and the politics came. The synod bishop was a former pastor from that other church. And there could have been a equitable marriage there at one point in time, but there was a confirmation class without a pastor in this one, and he agreed to take them. And he did, and it would have been a wonderful way to segue to join the church. But instead of leaving the door open and let it happen naturally, he said, "I won't confirm those kids unless your parents join our church." It just ambushed the whole thing. Well, that bishop was the bishop that I had to confront when I was sitting with Lee Yarger at First Lutheran about being a pastor up at Hope. And the issue was over communion and the piety of the pulpit, the people up there at Hope Lutheran in Glenburn wanted just to have communion every Sunday. And they didn't want to have the laying of hands on the elements and then, the blessing, and then maybe the gopher that brings it up. And then, and I didn't quite understand that whole business because we were in the chapel at First Lutheran. The pastors were in the other, and they didn't, they weren't blessing the elements when we were taking care of the stuff. Anyway, it was kind of unique part of that traditional dynamic that doesn't always make sense for the purpose. So the whole point of us meeting was whether or not I could serve communion. And I listened to my pastor and the bishop go at each other for a while, and I'm kind of sitting like I did here in the first part of this thing, like George Goebel, And I said, "Can I say something?" And they both kind of looked at me and said, "Okay, what do you got to say?" And I said, "Okay." And I looked right at the bishop and I said, "If you're going across the desert, a very dry desert, with just enough water for you and your donkey to get across, and you come across somebody who's dying of thirst, would you deny him a drink of water to save their life?" And the bishop said, "Of course not." I said, "Well, okay, what if you only had to give him that water, that life-giving water, in a dented cup? Would you not give him the water?" He said, "No." He says, "I told him I'm the dented cup." Some of you people have heard that, but that's kind of where my ministry is. It isn't about me. I'm just a vessel. Yeah. Whether I'm preaching the word or whether I'm serving communion to somebody or whether I'm handing out a CD, I'm just a dented cup. I'm just a guy. The power of the ministry comes in the word of the CDs that we give on Sunday, in the words of institution I deliver on, and I've done baptism. It's the words that are given from Scripture that are God-breathed words. And I'm just the vessel. The whole thing we talked about Monty Python, Holy Grail thing. I'm just that chalice. I'm a beat up one. I'm nothing fancy. I'm just a guy. And God has put in me, for some reason, a desire to serve. And I'm never satisfied with just self-serve, because that, to me, that's not what it's about. I'm wired, and in my direction, wherever I go, is going to be wired to serve somebody, to make sure that the connection between God and them is always there. And if they need a little help, then I step in. Mm-hmm. And, not because I am on any kind of ego trip. It's just that I can see it. I can feel it, and it's something within you. And so young people who are thinking about ministry, it isn't like somebody's going to knock on you over the head on top of a butte and say, "Hey, you got to do this." In my case, it was pretty close. But it could be in the car, and you can feel it, the tugging in your heart. It can be in a boat on the lake. It can be in the field on a tractor. It can be quiet time in your own room. And don't deny the call, because when God calls, like I said, He's patient. He'll wait, and He'll drive you. And this has been a wonderful gift that I've received. And I feel blessed, and I'm just so. It's so fun to come to church and be a part of a ministry that's really reaching out to people and having faith driving him. So I think this church. I thank every one of you who are listening for your support of what's going on, and God bless you, and stay safe, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah. What's happening for Thanksgiving? I suppose we got to keep it on the down low if anybody wants to have a gathering of more than 10. Right?
I can just say there is a nap involved during the football game. Other than that,
Do you have your lefse yet? Is your lefse ready to go for Thanksgiving?
well, maybe it's on the work because my wife and my youngest daughter-in-law were talking, so I don't know. See, you got to hear this. You know what? My wife will just cringe when she hears this, but when I was out in the East Coast and I was pretty much intending on setting up a special gift for our engagement, some guys would, other than the ring, I mean, of course that came, but some guys would, maybe consider something different. But I kind of laid the plate square in front of her, and I got her a lefse griddle for engagement.
there you go. That's what I wanted to hear. That's love. That is love that will last.
And she still said yes.
Yep. She said, well, her answer was, "What's this?" So I knew I had work.
What?
Are we learning that Ryan doesn't like lefse?
Oh, man. You're just beating up on me incessantly.
Wait. I'm learning not a Vikings fan.
Nope.
Don't like lefse.
Check.
Are you sure you're from North Dakota?
Yeah, but I'm German-Russian, though. I'm a sauerkraut guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but so
You
am
could
I,
be
and I'm
both.
Norwegian Swede. So
What's that?
You can be both.
Yeah.
You don't need them together.
I like to take sides. Yeah.
Have you had lefse
Yeah.
with butter and sugar on it?
Well, see, shouldn't it stand alone?
No.
It's like
okay. Have you
know
ever had
what?
lutefisk? You want to try standalone with that?
We'll just make it easier. I just muted him. We can just have a conversation now about lefse.
Oy vey.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Yep.
hoofda.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I have. Yeah, with butter and sugar, it's not bad.
Well, that's the way you eat it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to go walk on stilts. Oh, do I need stilts?
You know what that reminds me of? Have you had cocoa wheats?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Why?
Well, why? So my kids, I make cocoa wheats like my grandma did.
Mm-hmm.
So I make them like it says on the box, except where it says to put water in it, I do milk. Mm-hmm. And then when they're all done, then I add the sugar and the whipping cream to it, right? So it's real sweet.
Is this like cream of wheat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They got cocoa in it.
Okay.
Right. So I touch it up like that. Well, then the kids are like, we really like cocoa wheats. So they're telling my mother-in-law that they just love cocoa wheats. Would you get us cocoa wheats so when we come stay with you, we can have cocoa wheats? One day I go over there to pick the kids up, and she's like, well, you can take these with you, and it's a box of cocoa wheats. And I said, well, what do you mean? They won't eat it. I don't know what I did wrong. They don't like it. Okay. I had to tell her, well, you got to add the cream and the sugar to it like my grandma did.
Yep.
See, we need to put together like an atonement recipe book and get Ryan's cocoa wheats in there.
So you're talking like the box, right? You boil in water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, in milk.
Well, I mean, you boil it. And
Yeah.
then
Yep.
Yeah. See, that's like,
And then
what was that we were talking about before cocoa wheats? You and I knew it exactly. It was something, not cocoa wheats, but it's cream of wheat.
Oh, cream of wheat. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if they're eating that,
Mm-hmm.
Rummelgraut's going to be less like.
Oh, yeah. Have you had Rummelgraut?
No, that I have not had. I don't even know what that is.
Bob Gillen, if you're hearing this,
Special delivery to Ryan.
Well, okay, look, unlike German food, most Norwegian food is very bland and really just an excuse to eat large quantities of melted butter. And that's Rummelgraut. But then you add the sugar on top of it, and boy.
Okay.
It'll warm you up on
cinnamon
in
too.
the
I
best way.
like cinnamon with mine too.
So I lived in the South for a couple years. Do you know what Rummelgraut reminds me of? And this is going to offend so many people.
Mute him.
Grits.
Yeah. Well,
Grits. If you added sugar to grits and kind of mash them up a little bit.
for those with more of a, I guess, developed taste of fine food, they might consider it looking like a hollandaise sauce.
Yeah.
But it's. I remember when I was teaching in Minot, and we always have the Hustfest up there, and one of the things First Lutheran did was make boatloads of rummerkraut, and I'm not talking just. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it would be enough to sink a big size ocean liner. And we would go
schooner
through,
size.
Oh man! But it was so good, and I learned how to make it right. And I remember I taught at Minot Air Force Base for a little while, and of course those kids come from all over the world. And I mean, I've had Korean cuisine, Thai cuisine made fresh. I mean, brought to my room. Mm-hmm. So I brought rummerkraut in, and I let them taste it cold. And I said, "Who wants to try this?" And they go, "Well, that kind of tastes weird." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to heat it up, put a little sugar, cinnamon sugar, and a little butter because it needs it." And I said, "Who wants to try it then?" And I had about 6 kids that raised their hand. And I said, "Okay." And of course, from cold to hot is like, summer and winter here. It's way different. And brought it into class, and the head spun like, "What's that?" And I said, "You said you didn't want any." And those 6 kids are going like, "Yeah, okay, we'll share." But it's really good. And the part of it is that, as Bob, Jill, and I referred to it, attest to, is that it's timing and the way you put it together, and to make sure that it has that good flow to it. And it should make its own butter when you're doing it. So, and then you're doing it right. So again, Bob, if you hear this, Ryan Jenke needs to be taught a lesson.
I think we're going to hear from Bob Dylan. Isn't he a big fan of that podcast?
I'm not sure. Is he?
I thought he was.
I have no idea.
My
Bob?
heart tells me that he is.
Well, Bob, if you're listening, we'd love to hear from you.
We're going to have like one podcast of just Norwegian cuisine.
Oh, we haven't even talked about kumla or krib or blood kumla. Yeah.
Watch your language.
Sorry.
Blood sausage,
Oh, yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah.
That's the Russian, German, Polish.
Oh, man, I love blood sausage.
Okay.
Yeah, head cheese.
Yeah.
I was thinking more like we could kind of haze you and make you use the kroomkaka iron to like roll it and burn your fingertips off.
Kroomkaka.
Oh.
I think I got a root canal that day.
No,
Builds character.
Oh, well, then there's those almond cookies that are just really good.
Man.
We gotta wrap this up. I'm
Norwegian
late
wedding
lunchtime.
cake. It's all that. Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, cool. Well, John, thanks for coming on.
going to his house for Thanksgiving. He's got all that stuff.
I'm not going to be there. Come ahead. The dog will let you in. I know.
Sure. Well, if your dog has kroomkaka to share, I guess.
If my dog has kroomkaka, I don't have a dog anymore.
I love it. I love it.
Right now, our southern listeners are going, what are they talking about? Because that does not sound very good. Anyway.
Well, it's our time to check out.
Yeah.
Again, thank you very much for inviting me. I tried to tell my cousin a little while ago that we just talked on the phone. What do you know, John? I said, you got 30 seconds. I'll tell you everything I know. And he says, yeah, I know you better than that. And that's kind of proof again.
No, it was great. I appreciate you sharing all that, and we love you around here.
Did I answer your question?
What was the question?
I don't think there was a question. I think we just wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
That was
We just wanted John to come in.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you again.
You bet.
Thank you.
Now you can tell your family you're a YouTuber. What'd you tell me about that yesterday?
Yeah, one of my grandsons will ask me, how does that float on water?
No. Now you can tell them you are an influencer.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
Influencer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know what that is, but you're
I'm not going to say anything.
Oh, somebody should pray us out of here.
You got it, Ryan.
I got it this
Yep.
way? All right. Heavenly Father, I thank you for today, and I thank you for John, and I thank you for the work he's done and the work that he does. Lord, I know how important that he is and his work is to the people he serves. Lord, I thank you for his heart, and he's been a blessing here at Atonement and many other places. So thank you for him and for all the people who are listening. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Again, I forgot to share, we have services coming up 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. You can find us at atonement.live and atonementfargo.org or on the YouTube by searching Atonement Fargo. And for Pastor DJ Lura, Sarah DeYoung, and John Melland, I'm Ryan Janke. Join us next week for another riveting episode of that podcast.
God.